Hello, everybody. It's Laurie and Jenny, and today we're here to work with you on our AstroBiography project, as we like to call it, where we just take some celebrity charts, and Laurie, with her wonderful skill set, finds an amazing documentary about the person in question, and you get to watch the documentary and look at the chart at the same time and learn a ton about astrology. So that's what we're doing here today. So Laurie, who are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about Amelia Earhart. There are some short documentaries, I believe, on YouTube that you can watch. So look them up, and if I find one that I think is really ideal, I'll put it in the show notes as well.
Yeah, and probably most of you know who Amelia Earhart is. I mean, she's a pretty famous character, but she's the female pilot who disappeared on a trip traveling around the world solo. And she's still a mystery. We still don't know to this day exactly what happened to her. But we have her chart.
Okay, and she was not solo on that trip.
Oh, she wasn't?
No, there was a man with her. I can't remember his name, but there were two of them. She was flying it. She did have a companion with her.
Oh, okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, all right.
Pull up her chart. Let's take a look.
Take a look at it, yes. And here we have Amelia.
There she is. Look at that. And you know, the first thing when we look at these charts, because they are, they're famous people. Otherwise, we wouldn't be picking them for this project. And when you're thinking about famous people who were possibly born a very long time ago, I like looking at charts of people who are long gone for some reason. But with Amelia Earhart, with any of these famous people charts, we're going to look at the midheaven and the 10th house, because that's what they're going to be known for. They're going to be known for their career or reputation, how we see them out in the world. We might know nothing about their family, but we know something about this, and that's why they're remembered many years later. So the first thing we're going to look at is the midheaven and the 10th house. In looking at the midheaven, we've got Capricorn there. What is that going to tell us?
Well, first thing you want to do too is take a look at, are there any planets near that midheaven? And in this case, there aren't. So right away we move to, okay, well, it's in Capricorn. So the next thing you want to think about is what planet rules Capricorn. And that takes us right over to Saturn. So that'd be the first kind of direction you might want to go with this. And Saturn is over here by right next door to Uranus. And those two are together very tightly in this chart. And she's got Saturn in Scorpio in the 7th house. So what does that tell us? What do you think?
Well, it tells us that she's known for something serious but unusual. I mean, it brings in the unusual. The other thing that I want to mention too is that with whole sign houses, the midheaven becomes a floating point, so it's not attached to the cusp of the 10th house. And the fact that it's over here in the 9th house is really interesting. She's known for something serious but unusual in the realm of 9th house. What's 9th house? Among other things, travel. So what could be more unusual? Someone born in 1897, a woman flying solo, because she flew, I think she did a solo trip across the Atlantic. This trip where she disappeared was around the world, and she did have someone with her, but she did do a lot of solo travel as well. So that really, and the other thing, the 9th house is also about publishing. She published a lot of books. She did a lot of teaching work. She did a lot of career counseling with women, encouraging them in more male-dominated fields. So that brings in the unusual relationships. You know, she was really working with people to expand awareness of what they were capable of in their careers as well.
Hmm.
Huh.
Cool.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that we were talking about with this chart that's interesting is that you have, again, as Laurie's been talking about, Saturn ruling the midheaven conjunct Uranus. But what's funny about this is those two planets don't have any aspects to anything else. So they don't, there's no trines or squares or oppositions or sextiles to any other planets or group of planets in the chart. So it's really, it kind of has this, it lends this feeling to it of like she disappeared, and there's like this chunk of information is just there by itself, like disconnected from everything else in the chart.
Right. It's an unaspected island. Those two planets are an unaspected island. Yeah, and because they do. Saturn rules her midheaven, and Uranus rules that north node, which is in the 10th house. And that really does. It feels like that it's separate from the rest. It's unknown.
Yeah. I'm down here in the aspect grid. I'm just showing you. See, this is empty. This is Saturn. Just for those of you who work with this aspect grid, and you can see that the only thing Saturn does is it has that conjunction with Uranus. And same, basically here, we're looking at Ptolemaic aspects.
Yeah.
So it's just those 5 well-known aspects, but that is empty except that conjunction. So that's how you can see that in the chart. This little squiggle over here is a pretty esoteric thing, so don't worry about that. But that's what we have.
So yeah, that's an unaspected island, and look how close it is too. It's like 0 degrees. Yeah, that is a very, very close aspect.
Yeah.
Huh. The other thing.
Yeah, go ahead, Laurie.
Well, I just wanted to say something that you had brought up initially with this chart is just the amount of air.
Yeah.
Air in the chart, which is, we were laughing about it when we were looking at it before, how just literal. Sometimes astrology is literal in a way that is just very humorous. I find it really interesting. It's like everything's in air.
Yeah.
And she was in the air.
Yeah.
She disappeared into thin air.
Yeah, I know. And her name's Earhart. I mean, it's
right.
Like really funny. I know sometimes it's just so literal. It's just like it's almost like the universe is making a pun, you know?
Yeah.
Because she's got the, 4 planets in Gemini, and it's powerful planets. Pluto conjunct the moon is super powerful, and then Neptune conjunct Venus brings in this whole ethereal, elusive, intangible element, and all that's in Gemini. And then the other air thing we're looking at is this, the North Node up at the top. So we have Aquarius on the 10th house and North Node in Aquarius. So that also that's the other major air component, which suggests that sort of the entire forward trajectory of her life has to do with that air component. And once again, yep.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and air is about the intellect, and she clearly was a very intelligent woman with all the work that she did as well. Another thing that I just want to point out, since you were talking about these unaspected planets, or unaspected except for that conjunction, the sun itself in this chart is unaspected.
That's a good point. That's right.
Really, it's interesting if you think about, kind of to pull things into a more personal level with this chart. What was going on? Her whole, there's so much below the horizon. The only planets above the horizon are retrograde, which really suggests a very strong inner focus, and a lot of challenges in the inner life, the inner early home life. And one of the things that jumps out at me, besides that sun being unaspected, the Pluto connection on the moon. And she had a very powerful mother. The impact of her mother, which Pluto on the moon is going to bring in a lot of power that comes from the mother. Her mother lost a baby right before her, my understanding, and there were two girls. She was born after the baby that died, and then there was another daughter. And the mother raised these girls back in 1980, whatever, very differently than how little girls were raised. She was put in pants, not in a dress, which she didn't always like because she kind of wanted to fit in as well. But there was just a lot of, her mother really taught her to be a very strong woman, and left her father because her father was an alcoholic. And, that took a lot of courage and a lot of strength, and probably put a very strong stamp on who Amelia Earhart grew up to be, and how she was able to be the incredibly strong woman she had to be to do the work that she did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yeah, and just, down there in that fourth house, having all that Leo. That's yeah.
Yeah, hidden away down there. And it's almost like, that sun unaspected. I wonder, how much that relates to the relationship with her father, because I know she really loved her father from what I've read, but he was kind of removed in a way with his alcoholism.
Yeah, and he just wasn't very strong. Like, he wasn't a strong figure, and so he didn't really help her out a whole lot, is what I understood. But she still loved him. She still loved to connect with him, but he just wasn't really available or able to be that supportive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Whereas the mother kind of, she took control of things and moved across the country with the girls because she wasn't willing to be in that alcoholic environment.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
is there anything about this square that you want to say, the square between all these Gemini planets and the Virgo?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So, yeah, I mean, basically what Laurie's talking about is how this cluster, the Moon and Pluto, and then Venus and Neptune, is square to Mars and Jupiter. And those are in a very tight conjunction, both 10 degrees Virgo, and pretty tightly squaring that Moon. So really what that does to the Moon, first of all, from a personality point of view, it heats it up and it makes it big. It really adds some force to that Moon, and same with the Jupiter, making it bigger. But it also speaks to probably some emotional difficulty. I mean, to have Mars squaring your Moon, that's a lot of angsty, difficult issues to deal with, and having to find, especially when Pluto's also conjuncting that Moon. I mean, it really just speaks to some very difficult stuff in her inner life. And as a child, like just things being uncomfortable and painful, and separation perhaps. But at the same time, it brings in a lot of force and some power and some visibility to that Moon Pluto conjunction.
Yeah.
So it's like raw power. That's how I think about it. Sometimes I think Pluto's like the volcano.
Yeah, and
Mars is,
yeah, that's really powerful. If you think about that Moon Pluto conjunction squared by Mars and Jupiter, that's incredible, powerful dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah.
And her values, that second house, her values, and she's got Venus in there with Neptune too.
Yeah.
It's almost like, I think with Venus ruling the ascendant, the Taurus ascendant, and Neptune conjuncting that Venus, it's almost like she could imagine anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking Taurus is so much, I mean, you were saying earlier that she maybe resisted her mother saying, hey, you can wear pants, and I can see that Taurus ruled by Venus, the desire to fit in. And because it has Neptune, it's like the shapeshifter, like Neptune conjunct the Venus.
Yeah, and then it's almost like, well, if I can't fit in, then I'm going to really not fit in, and I'm going to go, totally in a unconventional direction here. That's interesting chart.
Yeah, there's other I mean, there's quite a bit of things you go on about. I mean, it's also just, I wanted to note, we didn't talk a whole lot about Uranus and Saturn being in Scorpio, and bringing in that Scorpio. I mean, that also is an echo of the Pluto conjunct the Moon. It adds this depth and this kind of intensiveness. You know, it's a very it's an intense sign. So bringing that in kind of echoes the amount of power that's available in this chart.
Right. And if you bring that energy, since the Saturn and Uranus rule the midheaven and the nodes, it's like that, the intensity of the life and death issues.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it's funny because next year, 2021, we're going to have a square between Saturn and Uranus the whole year. So all the astrologers are having these conversations about Saturn, Uranus, and here we have it as a conjunction in this chart. And so it kind of brings in this combination of stability and structure, and then like totally off the cuff freedom and like creativity. And the fact she has them together and they both are ruling the midheaven and then the North Node, it's just like she had the ability to follow through. I want to fly, so I'm going to take lessons and I'm going to save up and buy my own plane, which she did, and I'm going to make that happen. And meanwhile, there's this awesome, like innovative, revolutionary type energy that she's up in the air flying. But to have the two together is such a strong statement.
It's such a strong statement, and it's a very cultural statement. I mean, these are slow moving planets that really shift things in the culture and in our understanding of who we are as humans. And the fact that rules there, and you know, I mean, every little girl in the world, well, maybe not every little girl in the world, I may exaggerate, but little girls grow up knowing who she was. You know, she made a statement that has lasted down through time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that's the cultural connection to her career.
Yeah.
You know, her career is a statement that assists little girls to this day.
Yeah.
You know, we all recognize pictures of Amelia Earhart, and we all look at pictures of Amelia Earhart and know that women can accomplish a lot that little women, little
ladies.
Little ladies born in 1897 didn't necessarily think they had those doors open to them. You know, the fact that the cultural, you know, she opened some doors.
Yeah.
She really, you know, disappeared or not, she opened a lot of doors for a lot of little women and little girls. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love Amelia Earhart.
Well, what Laurie's mentioning too, I just want to add one other thing that I did learn from Laurie, which is really cool, is one thing to look for in celebrity charts is when you see, as you kind of talked about this in the beginning, outer planets contacting inner planets. So we did touch on that, but it's really cool how in this chart she's got Pluto conjunct the moon, there's Neptune and Venus, you have Saturn and Uranus together, and Jupiter and Mars together. And there's like those major impacts on all four of those places, of just having something a little more transpersonal being brought into a more personal realm.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Uranus, Saturn it's a transpersonal planet and a social planet of Saturn, but nonetheless, it still attaches quite a bit of clout, I think, by looking at it that way. So when you look at other celebrity charts, like take a look for those things. See if you can see, doesn't have to be a conjunction, but see if you can see like those outer planets contacting the inner planets.
And they really do. They bring in the story of the culture into the personal life.
Yeah.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it's really cool. So.
All right.
Well.
Okay, I think we can wrap it up. And I think the next one, well, we're not sure what the next one is we'll do, but we'll do another one. Okay. Thank you, Jenny.
Thank you, Laurie. Thanks everybody for tuning in.
Absolutely. Have a wonderful day.
Me too.